You have seen it happen. A whole flock erupts into flight, yet one pigeon stays calmly on the ground. Why does it ignore the alarm that sends every other bird away? Welcome to the Pigeon Mind. Subscribe for calm, evidence-led pigeon documentaries. Stay until the end, because the reason is not simple bravery. Today, we uncover why one pigeon chooses to stay. You have almost certainly seen it happen, even if you never stop to really think about it. A whole flock of pigeons rests on the ground, calm and quietly busy in the warm sun. Then something shifts, and in a single heartbeat, almost every bird explodes into sudden flight. The air fills with a clap of wings as the entire group lifts and wheels away together. But right there on the ground, one single pigeon simply stays exactly where it was. It does not flinch, it does not flee, and it does not even seem mildly concerned. The others vanish over the rooftops, while this one bird carries on as if nothing happened. So here is the small mystery that is genuinely worth pausing on for a quiet moment. Why does one pigeon stay behind when every other bird decides it is time to go? It is tempting to think that one bird is simply braver than all of the rest. But the real answer is far more interesting, and it sits deep inside flock behavior. To understand the bird that stays, we first have to understand the flock that flees. A resting flock of pigeons is really a shared and very sensitive alarm system. Each bird watches the others constantly, reading their posture for the very first hint of fear. When a single bird suddenly bolts, that movement spreads outward like a wave through the group. No bird wants to be the last one sitting when a real predator might be coming. So flight becomes contagious, leaping from neighbor to neighbor far faster than any conscious thought. This is the safest possible rule when the cost of guessing wrong could be your life. Flying away needlessly costs a little energy, but ignoring a real threat could cost everything. So evolution quietly favored the birds that simply leave first and ask questions much later. Sudden shadow, a loud bang, or a running dog can trigger the whole group at once. Most of the time, there is no real danger there at all, just a harmless false alarm. The flock circles overhead briefly, scans the ground below, and then drifts slowly back down. This constant lifting and landing is the normal rhythm of life for a city flock. But within that nervous group, not every single bird responds in exactly the same way. And that small difference is the real key to the bird that chooses to stay. Every wild bird carries an invisible boundary that scientists call its flight initiation distance. It is simply the distance at which an approaching threat finally makes the bird take off. Cross that invisible line, and the bird will leave, no matter how relaxed it looked before. Stay outside it, and the very same bird may calmly ignore you completely. This boundary is not fixed, and it shifts with the bird, the place, and the moment. A pigeon in a quiet country field keeps a very large and cautious safety distance. The very same kind of bird downtown may let you walk within a single easy step. City birds have learned that most humans simply pass by without any harm at all. So their boundary slowly shrinks until they barely react to the ordinary bustle around them. The bird that stays behind often simply has a much smaller boundary than its neighbors. What spooked the whole flock never even crossed that one relaxed bird's personal line. From the outside, it looks like bravery, but it is really a difference in tuning. Each bird has quietly calibrated its own sense of exactly how close is too close. And that personal calibration is shaped by experience, by place, and by temperament. This brings us to something surprising that researchers have found again and again in birds. Individual animals, including ordinary pigeons, genuinely seem to have stable and lasting personalities of their own. Some birds are consistently bold, while others are consistently shy and far more cautious. A bold bird approaches new things quickly, explores more, and is slower to take alarm. A shy bird hangs back, stays alert, and is usually the very first one to flee. These are not random moods, but steady traits that follow each bird across many days. The bold pigeon trades a little extra risk for better access to food and space. The shy pigeon trades lost meals for a much lower chance of ever being caught. Neither strategy is simply better, and that is exactly why both quietly survive together. In a stable flock, you will find a real spread, from the daring to the timid. The bird that stays behind is very often one of these naturally bolder individuals. Its threshold for fear sits higher, so the shared alarm simply does not move it. It has likely learned that this particular spot has rewarded calm patience before, so it weighs the odds quietly and decides that staying is simply worth the small risk. There is also a hidden cost to every single takeoff that we rarely ever notice. Flight is one of the most energy-hungry things that any small bird can possibly do. Launching a body into the air burns precious fuel that the bird must later replace. For a bird living on scattered crumbs, that wasted energy genuinely adds up over a day. So flying away from a false alarm is never completely free for the flock. Every needless flight is a small tax paid against the simple business of staying alive. The bird that stays quietly avoids paying that tax again and again throughout the day. While the flock burns fuel circling overhead, the patient bird simply keeps on eating. Over many hours, those saved calories can become a real and meaningful advantage. But this only works when the bird's judgment about real danger is actually correct. Stay when a true hawk is diving, and that one bold choice could be the last. Staying is a gamble, a careful bet placed quietly against the odds of the moment. A flock has no leader, yet somehow it still decides together when to rise and go. The decision spreads through simple rules, each bird reacting only to its nearest neighbors. A few nervous birds can tip the balance and pull a calm majority into sudden flight. But if too few react, the alarm fizzles out and the whole flock settles again. The bird that stays is one whose private vote simply never reached the tipping point. It is a quiet democracy of nerves, settled in a fraction of a single second. This is how thousands of starlings sweep across the sky as one breathing shape. Pigeons do a smaller, rougher version of that same elegant shared decision-making. Understanding this, the lone bird is simply one whose threshold was never quite crossed. It did not defy the group, it simply never felt enough reason to agree with it. Much of this calm comes from a slow process that scientists simply call habituation. When something harmless repeats often enough, the brain quietly learns to stop reacting to it. The rumble of traffic, the passing crowds, the slamming doors, all slowly fade into background. A bird raised in this chaos simply does not flinch at things that terrify a newcomer. It has heard 10,000 harmless bangs and learned that almost none of them mattered. This is not bravery at all, but the quiet wisdom of long and patient experience. The newcomer flock flees, while the seasoned local bird barely lifts its head to look. Habituation lets a city bird save its precious alarm for the threats that are genuinely real. But the learning has to stay sharp, because true danger does still visit the city. Urban hawks and falcons hunt these very flocks from the rooftops and the tall towers. So a good city pigeon learns to tell a harmless rumble from a genuine threat. The bird that stays has usually judged correctly that this alarm was only a false one. It read the situation faster and better than the nervous crowd that fled around it. Experience, temperament, and a smaller fear boundary all quietly combine in that single choice. There is one more quiet factor that can keep a single pigeon calmly on the ground. Sometimes the bird has learned that one particular person nearby means safety and not danger. If a trusted feeder is standing there, the bird may feel little reason to flee. It has paired that familiar figure with crumbs and calm rather than with any threat. So while the jumpy flock reacts, this one bird weighs a familiar and reassuring presence. This is learned association, the same quiet learning that shapes so much of bird behavior. But we should be careful and not turn this into more than the evidence allows. The bird is not loyal, it is not grateful, and it is certainly not in love. It is simply running the odds on safety, on food, and on past experience. All of these threads, temperament, habituation, energy, and learning, pull on that one decision. And the result is a bird that simply stays while its whole world takes to the sky. Once you understand the reasons, that lone calm bird stops looking quite so mysterious, which brings the whole thing right back around to you and your own daily walks. The next time a flock erupts, try not to watch the birds that fly away. Instead, look carefully for the one or two birds that calmly choose to remain behind. Watch how that bird holds itself, relaxed and upright, while chaos unfolds all around it. Notice whether it keeps on feeding or simply watches the panic with quiet detachment. See if the same individual tends to stay behind on more than one separate occasion. Look closely for any markings, a pale feather or an odd patch, to track that bird. Check whether a familiar feeder or a sheltered safe corner might explain its easy calm. Watch where the threat came from and ask whether it truly ever reached that bird. Over several visits, you may start to see the quiet personalities hiding in the flock. The bold regulars, the nervous newcomers, and the steady veterans, all sharing the same stone. What looked like one gray crowd slowly becomes a community of distinct little individuals. And the bird that stays becomes a small window into how all of them are thinking. You begin to read the flock, not as noise, but as a quiet web of decisions. So the lone pigeon is not really braver in the simple way we first assumed. It is better tuned, better fed by patience, and better informed by its own experience. It has weighed a real cost against a real risk and quietly chosen to stay. That single still bird is running a tiny calculation that kept its ancestors alive. It is not love, it is not stubbornness, and it is not some lonely act of defiance. It is a living animal, reading its world far more carefully than we ever give it credit. The flock flees on shared instinct, but the one that stays is making a choice. And once you can see that choice, an ordinary plaza becomes quietly full of small minds. So I will leave you with one simple and genuinely interesting thing to go and try. Find a flock, wait for the moment it scatters, and watch for the bird that stays. Tell me where it happened, and describe exactly how that calm bird held its ground. And tell me whether you think it was bold, experienced, well-fed, or simply unbothered. Then the next time you cross that square, you will never quite see the flock the same, because hidden inside that gray and ordinary crowd are dozens of small and separate decisions.